President Donald Trump surprised countries around the world last week by announcing he would double tariffs on metal imports to 50%.
The Prime Minister's message today was bolster and protect. Bolster the steel industry by growing the domestic market and protect by reducing the amount of foreign steel allowed into Canada.
Detroit didn't see it coming. 1 week, the factories were humming. Machines loud, workers busy, steel shipments on time. Then everything stopped. Rail cars sat empty. Assembly lines froze. Prices soared overnight. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on America's industrial heartland. Ford, GM, and suppliers across Michigan scrambled to respond, but the damage was already done. Across the border, something very different was happening. Canadian steel towns lit up. Overtime resumed. Parking lots filled. It looked like a trade war, but no shots were fired, no bans, no press conferences, just a quiet shift that turned the tables without warning. And yet, behind that silence was a decision that would unravel decades of economic partnership. So what exactly happened? Why did the lights go out in Detroit while Canada surged ahead? And how did one policy change trigger a $2.5 billion storm across North America? In early July 2025, steel imports from Canada to the US didn't just slow, they vanished. Customs data showed a drop of nearly 100%. What had been a steady stream of raw material for America's auto industry was now a dry pipeline. Detroit was the first to feel it. Ford, in its mid-year report, revealed a $2.5 billion surge in production costs, directly tied to soaring steel and aluminum prices. General Motors, Stellantis, and dozens of part suppliers soon followed with cost overruns, delays, and scaled-back operations. Plants in Dearborn and Flint reduced shifts. Construction projects stalled. Meanwhile, just a few hundred miles north, Ontario came back to life. Steel mills in Hamilton, Windsor, and Sault Ste. Marie ramped up production. Shifts that had been idle for years were back. Furnaces that once cooled during the pandemic now blazed nonstop. Parking lots filled. Local businesses boomed. The contrast was jarring. On one side of the border, shortages, layoffs, and price hikes. On the other, jobs, growth, and full capacity. For years, these regions moved in sync. But not anymore. Something had broken the rhythm, and it happened fast. The silence from Ottawa made it more unsettling. There were no official bans, no angry speeches, just quiet redirection. Steel that once crossed into Michigan now stayed home. For Detroit, the result was chaos. For Ontario, it was a revival. But behind that shift was a much bigger move. One that would turn a short-term shock into a long-term reset of power and production. In June 2025, President Donald Trump signed a bold executive order activating Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a rarely used national security provision. But this time, it wasn't aimed at China or other adversaries. It was aimed at Canada, America's closest ally and largest supplier of steel and aluminum. The order slapped a 50% tariff on all Canadian metal imports overnight. No warning to governors, no heads up to manufacturers, no coordination with economic advisors. The markets reacted instantly. Steel futures surged, jumping 18% within 48 hours. Stocks tied to manufacturing and construction fell sharply. Wall Street scrambled to price in the uncertainty, but the real impact landed far from the trading floor. Factories in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana faced an immediate cost crunch. Auto companies, already struggling with narrow margins, began halting production. Construction firms paused bids. Even public infrastructure projects were suddenly at risk. But while Washington buzzed with confusion, Ottawa stayed silent. There were no fiery speeches or retaliation threats. Instead, Canada made a quiet decision. Keep the steel at home. Procurement rules were revised. Environmental sourcing standards were tightened. Domestic projects were prioritized. Without lifting a finger in public, Canada had flipped the script. Trump expected a fight. Instead, he triggered a retreat, one where U.S. companies were left to chase rising costs, while Canadian industries ramped up. What looked like a show of force on paper became the starting point of something far more strategic and far more damaging to America's industrial backbone. While Washington braced for a counterstrike, Ottawa quietly reshaped the game. There were no tariffs, no embargoes, no press statements. Instead, Canada rewrote the rules. Procurement guidelines tightened, emissions standards raised, and national security protocols for infrastructure updated. These weren't headline-grabbing moves, but their impact was seismic. By mid-July 2025, the effects became clear. Steel wasn't banned from going south. It was just no longer eligible. New federal contracts required domestic or low-emission steel. Imports had to meet strict carbon thresholds, and under these terms, most U.S. steel simply didn't qualify. For American companies, this felt like a sudden wall. Long-term supply contracts were quietly canceled. Shipments vanished. There was nothing illegal, nothing that could be challenged at the World Trade Organization. Under WTO rules, countries are allowed to set environmental and national security standards for procurement. Canada followed the book, line by line. But while it looked technical on paper, the outcome was brutal. U.S. manufacturers scrambled to replace lost supply at double or triple the cost. Lobbyists flooded Capitol Hill. Lawmakers from the Great Lakes region accused Canada of creating a shadow trade barrier. But there was no clear enemy to target. Canada had simply shifted inward. The U.S. had expected a punch. It got a suffocation. And what looked like inaction from Ottawa turned out to be a carefully crafted pivot. While America was focused on tariffs, Canada used regulation as a lever. The message wasn't loud, but it was effective. Canada wasn't retreating. It was rerouting its future. The shock didn't stop at autos. As steel shipments into the U.S. dried up, the aftershocks reached deep into North America's energy backbone, Alberta's oil fields. For years, U.S. manufacturers had held a lucrative niche, producing high-grade, precision steel pipes used in Canada's massive pipeline projects. These weren't off-the-shelf products. They were custom-engineered, often under multi-year contracts, and essential for transporting oil and gas across thousands of kilometers. But by August 2025, those contracts vanished. Alberta's government announced a sweeping policy. All new pipeline expansions must use domestically sourced steel. Officially, it was part of a new clean infrastructure plan, promoting local jobs and lowering carbon footprints. But for U.S. suppliers, the message was clear: you're out. Over 180,000 tons of specialty pipe orders previously destined for American foundries were quietly redirected to Canadian mills. This wasn't just about energy. It was about self-sufficiency. The steel wasn't embargoed. It just no longer had a buyer south of the border. For companies in Ohio and Pennsylvania that had relied on these contracts to keep operations running, the shift was devastating. Some scaled back shifts, others halted production altogether. The damage was subtle but deep, a silent rupture in one of the continent's most integrated industrial corridors. And all of it happened without a single retaliatory tariff. While Washington accused Canada of playing unfair, Ottawa simply adjusted its priorities. What had once been a cross-border supply chain was now a closed loop. One pipeline decision, and the U.S. lost far more than metal. It lost access. By early 2025, while the U.S. was doubling down on tariffs, Canada was investing in transformation. Ottawa launched the $1 billion Steel Modernization Fund, targeting one goal: make Canadian steel cleaner, cheaper, and future-proof. This wasn't just about upgrading equipment. It was about reshaping the core of the industry. The strategy focused on switching from traditional blast furnaces, which burn coal and emit massive amounts of carbon, to electric arc furnaces, EAFs. EAFs use electricity to melt scrap or processed iron and can slash emissions by over 75%. But Canada went even further. Alongside EAFs, mills began adopting direct reduced iron, DRI technology, powered by hydrogen and natural gas instead of coal. This combination, EAF and DRI, is now considered one of the cleanest steelmaking methods on the planet. Canada has a unique edge here: its power grid. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec are already powered by over 90% clean electricity, mostly from hydro, nuclear, and wind. That means the steel coming out of these provinces doesn't just meet green targets, it beats them. While US producers are stuck paying carbon penalties or scrambling to retrofit aging coal-fired plants, Canadian mills are exporting steel that qualifies for EU carbon border exemptions. The difference shows up on global contracts. Clean steel now wins the bids. As global demand shifts toward low-emission materials, Canada isn't trying to catch up. It's already building the infrastructure, the supply, and the reputation to dominate the next phase of industrial trade, without needing anyone's permission. While US lawmakers were stuck in hearings, pointing fingers over rising steel prices, Canada was already solving the problem at the source. In mid-2025, Ottawa introduced a bold incentive: a 35% tax rebate for any manufacturer using recycled steel as their primary input. The goal was simple: build a circular economy where scrap becomes strength. This wasn't just about cutting emissions, it was about building independence. For many mid-sized and large producers, the rebate offered enough margin to justify a complete retooling of operations. Old supply chains were redesigned around recycled materials. Steelmakers that once depended on imported billets now turned to local scrap yards. But the shift didn't stop at the factory gates. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec rolled out new programs to expand municipal scrap collection, sort materials by grade, and supply directly to steel mills. Cities were incentivized to build sorting hubs and industrial reuse centers. The result? A national ecosystem where waste fed production, not landfills. This closed-loop system dramatically reduced costs, stabilized supply, and cut emissions by up to 70% compared to traditional methods. It also made Canada's steel sector more resilient, less vulnerable to global shocks, tariffs, or shipping delays. And global buyers noticed. Construction firms in Europe and Asia began seeking out Canadian suppliers for one reason: clean, reliable steel backed by a recycling engine no one else had fully built. While others debated policy, Canada had already engineered resilience out of scrap, strategy, and smart economics. Canada's steel strategy didn't end with clean furnaces or recycled scrap. It evolved into something much more powerful: diplomacy through certification. In 2025, Ottawa finalized a landmark agreement with the European Union to recognize Canadian steel under the new Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the EU's climate-driven tariff system. With this deal, Canadian producers gained a major advantage: a carbon passport. This certificate proves that steel was made using low-emission methods that meet or exceed EU climate standards. And with it, Canadian steel flows freely into European markets, without facing the extra fees that now hit carbon-heavy imports from places like the US, India, and Brazil. This wasn't just a trade perk. It became a filter. Exports were no longer sent to whoever paid the most. Canada began prioritizing partners that aligned with its long-term climate goals. That meant clean transit projects, green infrastructure, EV manufacturing, and nuclear development. If a buyer couldn't show real decarbonization targets, they dropped to the bottom of the list, or off it entirely. At home, this policy reshaped behavior. Companies that met Canada's federal net zero challenge weren't just praised, they were rewarded with preferential access to export channels and government-backed expansion programs. The message was clear: innovation gets rewarded, but only if it aligns with the bigger mission. As the US struggled to respond, Canada gained something harder to replicate than steel capacity: climate credibility. And in a world where access to markets depends on carbon footprints, that credibility now opens doors that tariffs can't. While the US scrambled to patch trade ties and calm domestic backlash, Canada simply moved forward. There was no need to leave the American market. It just stopped chasing it. Quietly, confidently, it opened new doors to Europe and Asia, powered by clean energy and carbon certifications the US couldn't match. What looked like retreat was actually a reset. Washington stayed reactive, trapped in emergency hearings, chasing headlines, blaming allies. But Ottawa had already rewritten the rules. Steel wasn't just a commodity anymore. It had become a symbol of direction, of design, of national priorities. Canada aligned trade with climate, industry with diplomacy, and investment with long-term security. And the US, focused on short-term leverage, found itself locked out of the very future it once dominated. So now the question isn't who imposed the first tariff. The real question is, who's shaping the next industrial age? If this helped you see the bigger picture behind global trade, hit like, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Because while Washington plays catch-up, the next shock is already on the way.